Hey, welcome back once again, folks. And this video, actually, probably I don't know if it's like the sixth or seventh video in the video series. So I've decided to actually focus from here onwards to focus on using nested loops. Basically, I'm going to make use of for loops. Using nested for loops, how are we actually going to print patterns like these? So in this video, I'm actually going to discuss about like how to write programs to print the pattern which is shown here, a triangular star pattern, after which we're actually going to see how do we print the number pattern in a triangular format, and then we're actually going to see how do we actually print the inverted triangular pattern over here using stars, and then we'll actually see how do we actually write a small program to print this sequence. So let's actually get started one by one to write this program using nested loops. It's pretty simple. It's not actually as tough as you think. So let me actually create a class and let me name the class as patterns. Alright, so I've created a class and I just clear the editor so I can start writing whatever I want to write. And one very important piece of advice is like I would want you to watch the previous videos. The previous videos actually talks about many things like how to actually accept user input using command line arguments, how to accept user input using scanner classes, and how to work with simple while loops, the difference between while loops and do while loops. And I have a dedicated almost like a 45-minute long video on using just for loops and some of the problems which can be tackled using for loops, like printing some series, adding a sum of the numbers in a series and all that. So hope you have watched all those videos, quickly revised and tried a couple of programs and got warmed up by the time you actually reached here. Otherwise, this video would be a little confusing and tough for you. So keeping in mind you have watched the previous videos in the series, I'm actually getting started with this video. Okay, now I have actually created a class by the name patterns. Now the pattern which we are going to tackle is this thing, the triangular star pattern. So let me try to see if I can minimize this Word document. Yes, I can minimize it, and let me see if I can like squeeze it at the end of the screen so still we're able to see what is the pattern we're going to print. So we're actually going to print this pattern. So first let us write the skeletal structure of the program. So class pattern patterns, and end the class. Let me actually write a simple function, a public main function, not some other user defined function, a simple main function, public static void main. Let me double check if the recording is going on fine. Yes, it's recording. Yeah, public static void main. Then we actually start off with, alright, so how do we actually approach this program? We have to tackle this program step by step. If you take a careful look of this pattern in the right hand side, there are how many lines? 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. There are 5 different lines. So how do I actually write a simple for loop where I just have to print 5 new lines? 5 new lines, that's it, nothing else. You can see a new line, 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 you can see a new line. How many new lines are getting printed before printing anything? 5 new lines. So I would actually declare, like say count is equal to 5, or row count, row underscore count, which I keep it as RC, is equal to 5. I want 5 different rows. Then I start my for loop and I declare a variable called I. I declare a variable called I. So what happens is for I equals to 1, I less than or equal to row count, I plus plus. I do this. Now coming into the for loop, what am I supposed to do here? I am just supposed to print 1 new line each time when this outer loop is getting executed. This is the outer loop. Each time the outer loop is getting executed, I just want to print a line. Print ln, that's it, print a new line. Fine. Printing of 5 new lines are over, but you must be wondering, where is the logic to actually print the stars? Simple. Let me open the notepad. Now forget about this pattern as a whole. Just forget about the pattern as a whole. Now just see the first row. First row, how many stars are getting printed? I am printing 1 star. So I would want to have int j. Alright, j is equal to 1. And I would like to give it as j less than or equal to 1, j plus plus. Agree or disagree? I hope you agree. I want to just print 1 star, nothing else. System.out.println. I would just like to print a star, nothing much. Hope this one, the value of j is equal to 1 and the value of j less than or equal to 1 and j plus plus. This loop is going to get executed exactly once. It will print 1 star. Fine. What if I copy paste this and keep it inside here? What would happen? What would happen? Let's see. What would happen if I actually kept this here? So each row, it's going to print 1 star, nothing more than that. Each row, I'm just printing 1 star. I would like to actually, declare the value of j over here. Int j is equal to 1. J is initialized to 1. Fine. Or I would just like to keep it as j. So I think this is pretty much clear to you. The inner loop is going to just print 1 star. And the outer loop actually is controlling the entire block 5 times. So what would be the output of this program? I think you can guess it. The output of the program over here, the output of this program is going to be 1 star per line. Let's actually compile it, close it, and let's call the main. See, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's just printing 1 star per line. But now what we have to think is, we have to think a little bit more about how do we change this program so that when this loop is executing for the second time. Now mind you, the blue color thing what I'm showing you in the notepad separately over here is outside this program. Now the same function is what I've actually copied and pasted inside the main loop. Say I would call this thing as loop 1 and I would call it as loop 2. So loop 1 is actually running 5 times and loop 2 is running exactly once. But I want to make a small change, mind you. When loop 2 is running for the second time, I want it to run twice, not once. So loop 2, when it is running for the second time, I want to make it run twice. Look at the highlight over here. When loop 2 is, this is loop 2. Loop 2, the thing whatever is here inside the editor, I've just copied and pasted in the text pad. When the loop 2 is running for the second time, I want to run it twice. When it's running for the third time, I need to run it thrice. When it's running for the fourth time, I need to make it run 4 times. When it's running for the 5th time, I need to make it run 5 times. So can you actually see, for the first time it was j. For the first time this loop was j less than or equal to 1. Second time it is j less than or equal to 2. Third time it is j less than or equal to 3. And fourth time it is j less than or equal to 4. And fifth time it is j less than or equal to 5. Alright, so keeping this in mind, I need another variable over here, say max. Alright, I initialize max to 1. I say max over here. But each time when it is completing this loop, I'm just telling max plus plus. Alright, for some of the clever programmers out here, or those of you who are actually experienced with programming, you can replace max by I. That would still work. That would still work if you replace max by I. But I actually want to keep things very simple for some of the beginners who are, like very afraid of trying patterns with loops. So what I've just done is I've created a third variable called as max, which is initialized to 1. So first time when it actually comes inside the bigger for loop, the bigger for loop is just printing 5 new lines, that's it. The bigger for loop, loop 1, or the outer loop, this one, is just running 5 times. But the real loop which prints the stars is this one. This is the star loop, which I call it as a loop 2. First time when the inner loop or the loop 2 is executing, the value of max is going to be equal to 1. So this will actually print 1 star. Second time this is actually going to print 2 stars because max is going to be max plus plus. Third time it's going to print 3 stars because this for loop or the loop 2 is going to get executed 3 different times because max is equal to max plus plus. So this keeps on continuing. So since this is just a revision class, I don't intend to actually explain every bit and detail of this. We almost spent half an hour in the class explaining this program. So I hope you're able to recall the same logic what I used to explain in the class. This is a revision class. So quickly, let's actually execute the program. Compile this, no syntax errors, close it. I'm keeping my fingers crossed. Let's see if it works. Call the main. Okay, I know what is the problem now. Open this. Don't give print ln over here, just give print. Compile this, close it. Now call the main. See, that's it. As simple as that. So in case if you didn't understand any step, you can happily pause the video, rewind it, watch it any number of times until you get the logic right. So let's move on to the next pattern in our program. Clear it. Close it. The next pattern which I would like to explain in our program is, we are done with the star pattern. So let's actually go to the number pattern. Let's actually look how to actually print these numbers. 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If you look at the structure of the program, it's exactly the same. Just like printing stars, now you have to print numbers. So this is easy to do it now. Let me open and keep it here for you. Now you're printing star. Instead of printing star, you just have to print a number. Mind you, you have to print a number over here. What is that number you would like to print? There is some number which you have to print, and the number has to start with 1. Always it has to start with 1. So what is that number which is starting with 1? Let me actually create another variable called num. Num is equal to 1. Alright, num is equal to 1. So I'll print the number. Each time after you print it, each time in num, I would like to, each time after you print the number, I have to increment the number here, num plus plus. Right? So it's printing the number, and each time it's coming inside this loop, I have to initialize number is equal to 1. When I make number is equal to 1 here, observe carefully. First time it's coming inside loop 1, that's a bigger for loop. It's going to initialize number to 1, and it's going to run the inner for loop exactly once because the value of max is just 1 for the first time. And when the inner for loop is done executing once, the value of max is now 2 and the value of num is again 1. So the inner for loop is going to run 2 times, whereas number is initialized to 1. So have a careful look at the program. It's a self-explanatory and there's nothing much to explain. And for some of the clever programmers out there, you can replace num with j. It's still perfectly going to work. You can replace num with j. Some of you might not be happy using so many variables. So if you don't, I'm actually explicitly using many variables because to keep the programming simple. But an optimized way of doing it is like using less number of variables. So you can also replace, you can also replace max with I. It will still work, and you can also replace num with j. This is for, like people who are very comfortable with programming and are confident about tackling these kind of patterns. For those of you who are trying it for the first time, better stick to using extra variables. So have a look at the program. I've done a dry walkthrough. Now let's compile it. No syntax errors. Close it. Now let's run it. See, 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. As simple as that. Clear? Now let's close it. Now let's get back to the program. So for those of you who want to have one more dry run of this, because I was really quick on this, the inner loop is executing once for the first time, twice for the second time, thrice for the third time, 4 times for the fourth time, and 5 times for the 5th time. Who is controlling how many times the inner loop has to execute? Max. This variable is controlling how many times the inner loop is supposed to execute, and the outer loop is controlling how many times the inner loop is supposed to execute. So don't directly jump into this program. Work with the star pattern first and then actually come into this program. So now let me move on quickly to another pattern program. how do we actually print the star? So let me clear everything. Let me just have the main function. Let me clear everything. How do we actually print the star pattern? So the skeletal structure, what I would like you to actually follow in this program is count how many number of rows are here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 different rows. So initialize a row count, int row count is equal to 5. If you do this, almost like 40% of the program is done. If you're just writing the skeletal framework of the program, 40% of the program is done, and the remaining 50% will be very quickly done, and the remaining 10% will be automatically done when you complete the entire program. So first try the skeletal structure. First identify how many rows are to be printed. 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. In each row there is a new line. So I need to print 5 lines for int I is equal to 0, or for int I is equal to I is equal to 1, I less than or equal to 5. I would say I plus plus. Okay, instead of using 5, I'll use row counter, because we've initialized row counter variable, and as soon as we come inside the for loop, we have to print a new line. We have to print a new line. That's it. It's printing 5 new lines. Now observe carefully. Once again, I'm opening a text editor. Observe carefully. How many stars is actually getting printed for the first time? For the first time, I need 5 stars. So I can write a loop 2 inside loop 1. I can write loop 2 inside loop 1, something like this. So first time this loop 2 is executing, it is actually printing 5 stars. Now second time when this loop 2 has to execute, now what would be the output of this program? This program, what do you think would be the output of this program? It would blindly print 5 stars, right? Then next time if I make it 4, it comes out of this block, then it actually comes to this bigger for loop. Bigger for loop is going to print a new line. The bigger for loop, see, for example, this is getting embedded. Say this is getting embedded here. This is getting embedded here, the loop 2. Say this is 5. Alright, this is 5. So for the first time, let me move it here so I can accommodate everything here. Yeah. So for the first time, when this loop 2, which I just copied here, this is loop 1, and this is loop 2. So when I've actually copied this loop 2 and pasted it exactly inside, when j less than or equal to 5, this is going to print 5 stars. And then what's going to happen? Once this loop is done executing, the control will move back to the loop 1. Now the loop 1 has executed only once earlier. Now it has to execute second time. It has to execute 5 times because RC is equal to 5. When the loop 1 is executing 5 times, it will print a new line. New line is printed, so cursor is a new line now. Now what do you do now? I have to make some modification in loop 2 so that when loop 2 is executing for the second time, it has to execute only 4 times. So when the cursor is here, when the loop 2 is executing for the second time, it will execute 4 times. Again, after it finishes executing, loop 2 the control will come out of block 2, that is loop 2, and it will go back to loop 1. It will execute loop 1 because loop 1 has been executing only 2 times until now. When it is executing for the third time, it will print another new line. So the cursor will automatically come here. Now what does this loop 2 do? We have to make this j to 3. When we make it to 3, it will actually print 3 stars, and so on. It will print 2 stars, and then it will print 1 star. So hope you understood this, what this loop 2 does in combination with loop 1. Now let us see how do we make this 5, and how do we make this 4, how do we make this 3, 2 and 1. So what I do is I actually declare another variable over here called as star count. Alright, I initialize star count to 5 because first time I want to actually print 5 stars. But after I print 5 stars, when it is coming out of this, I have to do star count minus minus. I hope this is clear. When I do star count minus minus, What happens? Initially it was 5. After executing that loop, the control will come here. It's going to execute it 4 times, then it's executed 3 times, and execute 2 times, and it's executing 1 time. And then by the time this executes it 1 time, the outer loop would have finished executing 5 times. So we get 5 different rows, and finally, bingo, we get this pattern. Now let's see how it works. And for those of you, again, there is no hard and fast rule. For those of you who are very comfortable with programming and printing patterns, there is no hard and fast rule. You have to use star count, and you have to use star count minus minus over here. What you can do is you can use I in a tricky way. So I'm not going to discuss about this over here because it's going to confuse the generic audience. So you can even avoid using star count and play around with I and J if you're really comfortable with using loops. So I don't want to discuss those optimized code patterns over here because I'm actually targeting this for a generic audience who want to learn programming without any kind of inhibitions of fear. My whole goal is like, I don't want you to remember or by heart any programs, but just know the logic and go write the program on the spot over there. That's my goal. After you finish watching all these videos and you try practicing the videos at home, I mean the same programs at home. Compile this, close it, call the main. Okay, the same mistake as I did last time. Clear it, close it. I have to just give print. I just have to give print. Compile it. And I close it. And then I call the main function. Bingo. Here it is. See? It's actually printing 5 stars, 4 stars, 3 stars, 2 stars, and 1 star. As simple as that. Now let's actually move on quickly to another numeric pattern based on similar design. The next pattern what I've actually kept ready is like, how do we print this sequence? 1 2 3 4 5, 2 3 4 5, 3 4 5, 4 5 and 5. This is somewhat like, anyway, the skeletal structure is going to look similar to the last program, right? The skeletal structure is going to look very similar to the last program. Where did that go? All right, let me actually keep this here. I don't want a star count now. I don't want this variable called star count. It's confusing. I don't know what I'm going to do inside loop here. I just know that I just have, you know, the main skeletal structure ready. 5 different rows, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and a new line. Now, how do I design my inner loop? How do I design my inner loop? Suppose my inner loop is supposed to print 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What would this code segment look like if I print J over here? If I just print J over here, it would print 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Or let me initialize it to num over here. Num is equal to 1, and let me print, instead of J, let me print num, and let me print num plus plus. Now look at this code here in this text box. Oh shit, what happened? This went away. I want everything to be present. I want everything to be present together. Now just look at the text box over here. I mean this, what do you say, sticky pad over here, this notepad over here. What do you think this loop 2 would do? This loop 2, if I initialize a variable called num is equal to 1 and int j is equal to 1 and j less than or equal to 5 j plus plus, which is going to make sure this loop is going to execute 5 different times or 5 times. Each time I'm just printing the number and incrementing it and again printing it. So this would print 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. Now when I'm executing it for the second time, when this loop has to run for the second time, it has to print only 4 numbers. However, it has to start from 2, so I give num is equal to 2. So this time it's actually going to print, the next line it's going to print 2, 3, 4 and 5. Observe carefully, when this loop is executing for the third time, I want to actually print only 3 numbers. So this loop has to run only 3 times. But I have to start from number 3. So I have to reinitialize number to 3. So in the third time, it's actually printing 3, 4 and 5. Fourth time, 4 and 5. Fifth time, only 5. So are you actually getting any idea how to actually, like design this for loop? Alright, so I will tell you now. For int j, when you're beginning to write these kind of programs, don't worry about using extra variables, but don't try to mess up with I and j thinking you can reuse I and j, and they'll actually end up confusing these kind of looping programs. So just keep the loop counters I and j only for the operation of repeating the loops. That's it, nothing else. So I have to initialize j is equal to 1, j less than or equal to, say, maximum number of numbers which I have to print for the first time, and j plus plus, and inside I just have to print system.out.println, no, not ln, just print. I have to print the number. I don't know what my number is, but I just know that I have to create a number over here. I have to just, like declare a number over here. I have to initialize that number to 1. After it prints the number, I have to increment that number each time over here. This is nothing but a copy of the same operation. I've initialized a number to 1. Alright, I've initialized a number to 1. Do you think it's a good idea to initialize number to 1? No, I have to initialize it over here, and each time it is finishing this block, I have to give it as num++. Think why. It executes this loop once and goes out. Suppose I have to declare even max over here. I have to say max. When it's coming inside, max must be equal to 1, but when it's going outside, I have to make max plus plus. So this is a variable called max. When it is coming inside, max is equal to 1. Alright, now I have to make max is equal to how many over here? I have to make max is equal to 1 over here, and I just have to get rid of this. Max is equal to 1 inside the outer loop, and num is also equal to 1. This is loop 2. This segment actually is for loop 2, whereas outside the loop 2, in loop 1, I have to give num is equal to 1 and max is also equal to 1. So what am I doing here is, like, I'm incrementing num and I'm also incrementing max. I'm sorry, I have to decrement max. Max minus minus. I have to give max as 5 over here, because I want the inner loop to run 5 times for the first time. Hope you understand. First time when the inner loop is running, I need to run it for 5 times. So first value of max actually is 5, and the value of num is equal to 1. Let me put it in 2 different lines. So after it runs the inner loop, when it is going out of the inner loop, it will do max minus minus. The value of max now is equal to 4. Whereas while it is coming inside the inner loop, once again, I would have made num plus plus. So num will be equal to 2. Hope this is clear for you. So if you did not understand any part of it, just pause and again rewind the videos and watch it again and again. So you just have to see for some more time, or if you want me to actually reiterate once again, I know it's going to be a very lengthy process because I've done everything from the beginning. Okay, I hope you understood this, because this is just a repetition of what I've already done in the classroom. So I hope you'll be quickly able to recall the logic, and don't by heart it, for God's sake. And let's see if it's going to work. Compile it. No syntax errors. Close it. Where did that go? Now call the main. See? What is this? What is this? This is really funny for me. I didn't expect this. Alright. Let me see. What's happening? Aha! I now know what is happening here. Okay, I've already given num plus plus inside. Okay, I know what's exactly happening. Hold on for a minute. I'm printing the numbers. Okay, all I have to do here is I have to give num is equal to I. That's it. Because I will be 2 for the second time, and I will be 3 for the third time. I will be 4 for the fourth time. So when I make num is equal to I, First time when it's coming inside, anyway num is equal to 1 over here. So it's going to print 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It finishes printing 5 times. The control actually comes out of this block. Then it will come here. It will initialize num to I. So I is going to be equal to 2. So num will take over to 2 from next time. So compile this, close it. Watch this. Ah, no. My guess was wrong. We have to make it I plus 1. Compile it, close it, main program. Now we get it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 2, 3, 4, 5, 3, 4, 5, 4, 5, and 5. What's happening? Let's actually try to see it clearly by adding some breakpoints. I think that will be very useful. So I would like to add a breakpoint over here. Set breakpoint. And then let me add a breakpoint here. Over here. Tools and set breakpoint. Yep. I guess you know what breakpoints are. I don't have to explain what breakpoints are because in my previous videos I've used it on numerous occasions. Breakpoints are nothing but these red dots which are appearing over here, where I manually tell the compiler to deliberately stop the execution of the program until I actually go and press the button and say continue execution from there. So each time when the control statement or the control flow of the program encounters this red dot, it stops there. So compile this, close it, and now void main. Call the main function. See, it's stopping here. Can you see? Number of rows is 5. Num is initialized to 1. Look at this window. Here, the arrow actually is circling. Look at this window. When the first time when the loop is executing, row count is 5, num is equal to 1, max is equal to 5. Step into, get inside the loop. It's printing a new line. Step into, it's printed a new line. Now, step into the for loop. When you actually get inside the for loop over here, the local variables I is equal to 1, j is equal to 1, and then max is going to be equal to 5. And just see what will happen. How many times a number is going to get printed if I say step into. You'll just see how many times this yellow line actually is going to keep circling right inside the inner loop. It will print the number 5 times. I mean, it's going to print that statement 5 times with different values for num. See, 1. Step into, it's going to print 2. See, observe this window as well, same time. And see the yellow bar moving up and down over here. It's looping, it's circling right inside this loop. Step into, it's printing 3. Num plus plus, it's printing the value of num. What was the value of num? Num actually was 3 previously. Now it's going to become 4. What was the value of max? Max is going to be initialized to 5. Whereas what is the value of j? J is 4, max is 5. So one more time it has to print. See here, j is equal to 4 in this loop. This loop has just completed 4 times but not 5 times. When it becomes equal to 5, it will stop. Max is 5. Now see, it prints 5 and it stops. This loop will exit because this condition, j when it becomes equal to 6, it will be, see here, I'll show it to you. I'll show you, it has exited from the inner loop. It will come down. Now, the value of I was, where is it? I'll show it to you here. Okay, the value of I is previously 1. Now, num will get initialized to I plus 1. 1 plus 1 is going to be equal to 2. So you see, num got initialized to 2 because in the next line, we need to start printing from 2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is printed over here. From next line, we need to start printing from 2. 2, 3, 4, 5. Sorry, 2, 3, 4. So the max value is max minus minus. Previously, max was 5. After executing this step, max is going to become equal to 4. See, now is when you have to see the inner loop, something like this. Max has become equal to 4. Let me actually clear it. Max has become equal to 4. And num has become, when it's entering the second, when it's entering the loop for the second time, max will be equal to 4, and this is max over here. And because of the previous step, num became equal to 2. Num became equal to 2 because we had given num is equal to I plus 1, so num became 1 plus 1 is equal to 2. And now the outer loop will again execute. Let me close this notepad, we don't need it anymore, and observe. When I say step into, it's going to print a new line. You won't see it printing a new line because it's already printed. It's an empty line below here. Can you see this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? It's an empty line below this. You cannot see that. And now it's going to execute this inner loop. Can you see this arrow pointing to the yellow highlight over here? This bar will continue looping in the inner loop 4 times. Why 4 times? Because the value of max is equal to 4. Why is it equal to 4? Because I explained it to you just now, and you can already see max is 4, I is 2, num is 2, step into. It will execute 4 times. 1 time, second time, third time, fourth time. Done. It's going to come outside. When it is going to come outside, num is equal to I plus 1. What is the previous value of I? I is equal to 2. Okay. So num is equal to 2 plus 1, which must be equal to 3. So num got changed to 3. Now we have to print only 3 numbers in the next line. Instead of 2, 3, 4, 5, we just need to print 3, 4, 5. That's the reason why I am decrementing max. Because max is going to control how many times the inner loop is going to execute. So max actually is decremented. The max value was 4 previously. After I press step into, max will become 3. Keep watching. See, max became 3. Then it exited it didn't exit, it's actually going back again into the main loop, or the loop 1. Because main loop has to execute 5 times. How many times has the main loop executed? Look at the output terminal. It has executed only 2 times. Main loop has executed only 2 times. How can you justify it from the debugger window? See here. What is the value of current value of I? Current value of I is 2. It will execute until I becomes equal to 5. Now let's print step into. Now the inner loop, this inner loop is going to get printed. It's going to get executed max number of times. What is the value of max? 3. So each time it is coming inside, it's going to print num. The initial value of num is equal to 3. So it's going to print 3, 4, 5. Now again, step into. I'm not going to explain once again what is num doing, what is max doing. It's going to go outside, come outside. What is the value of I? I is still 3. So it's going to execute 2 more times until I becomes equal to 5, because 5 is the value of RC, the row count. Step into. This will execute 2 times. Print 4, 5. Now finally it's going to print 5. And the outer loop will now exit. The reason being I has reached the value of 5. So the outer loop executed, it exited, and then the main is finished. That's it. I'll just terminate it. So hope you understood this program. I've explained in detail how to tackle the logic for patterns. So I would like to keep this video short. I'll have one more video on printing more complicated patterns using stars and numbers. So I will actually end up the session with printing patterns and numbers, or patterns like star patterns and numbers, using nested loop in just 2 videos. So the remaining is like you have to understand the logic, how I'm trying to break into the problem, outer loop first, the skeletal structure which completes almost like 40% of your code, and then the inner loop separately. So this is the way you're supposed to actually tackle looping problems. You're not supposed to remember and by heart the values of I and j. If it's going to be a right triangle star pattern, I have to by heart the values of I and j. The inner loop, outer loop, don't do that. It's nonsense. That's not the way of learning programs. These are not poems to memorize them. These are programs. These are actually in your syllabus to enable logical thinking into you. So start thinking logically, learn programming, and that's the whole purpose why I've made this video for you. Alright for now, and hope I've actually covered up the basic patterns. Let me actually look back into the patterns once again. In this video, I've covered 4 different programs. One is to print a star pattern, the right triangle star pattern, the right angle triangle star pattern, and right angle triangle number pattern, followed by an inverted right angle triangle star pattern and inverted right angle triangle number pattern. Let me actually get back in the next program with next video with 4 more such kind of programs with patterns, and I would have discussed almost like 8 programs and patterns, including stars and like numbers. So using nested loops, which actually most of you find it very confusing, but if you practice it for just 2 days, it's going to be a piece of cake for you. It's going to be very easy and fun doing this. So hope you actually do it. Hope you actually do it, considering this as, like fun topics and not like, oh my god, yet another programming. Don't actually get into that mindset and do it. What is this doing? It's asking me to save it. Fine, I don't want to save it. I just close it because I want to pause the video. No, I don't want to save it. Fine, I've saved this. So let me actually pause the recording. Where did that thing go? Oh yeah, that's it for now. Goodbye and see you once again in another video.